one doesn't get such a big PR push as the compassion. Because everybody feels, oh, it'd be really nice to be compassionate. But do you feel it would be really nice if you could take pleasure in other people's successes? So if somebody gets promoted above you, somebody's a bit younger, a bit more beautiful, a bit more successful or something, and you can say congratulations, but part of you is like a little bit critical, right? So this, just like compassion, this is also something that you can work on. And if you work on it deliberately, you start to view people the way that you would view your children. If your children get some kind of success, you're really happy for them. But your friends, your brothers and sisters, your brothers-in-law, sisters-in-law, when they get something really happy, when they get something really successful, how happy are you for them? So all of these things are good qualities. So one way that I like to present Buddhism, or like to present some of these things, is not as a religion, but as good qualities. And mindfulness is one of many good qualities. So it doesn't really depend on your religious beliefs. It doesn't really depend on who you are. It's a good quality to develop. Everybody can and should develop compassion, sympathetic joy. Everybody can and should develop forgiveness. Now, these qualities don't really belong to a particular religion. If we talk about forgiveness, we tend to think about Christianity, but it's there in Buddhism also, it's there in Hinduism, it's there in Islam, it's there in psychology, it's there in common sense. It's a good quality in and of itself, regardless of who you are. Forgiveness then, compassion is the same. Now I would argue then that mindfulness is the same. It's a good quality to develop, regardless of who you are, regardless of your religion, regardless of your age, regardless of whether you want to sit down and do formal meditation for some period of time, or whether you just want to pick it up and consider it. It's a good quality to develop. So what exactly is mindfulness? Mindfulness is an awareness of yourself and your motivations. One of the key components to mindfulness is awareness, and that is a non-judgmental awareness. Non-judgmental awareness of who you are and how you are. You want to get interested in yourself regardless of your prior ideas, regardless of the way that you think of yourself. So that with this practice of continual self-observation, then you start to see that you're not quite who you think you are. You don't quite behave in the way that you think that you behave. Part of the reason for this, those of you who've done psychology, is we don't view the world as the world really is. We view the world through constructs. My own personal favourite psychologist of all time is George Kelly, who very underrated, and he came up with the idea of personal construct theory. That is, you don't see the world the way that it is. You see the world through a series of filters, and it's your way of understanding the world that's important. So he was dealing with people in Depression-era America, and he was treating them. These people had lost homes, jobs, family, houses, everything. Everything collapsed in the 1930s. And so he was treating people with Freudian techniques, analysing their dreams. And after a while he started to realise that analysing the dreams of somebody to understand their unconscious when they're really just suffering from, poverty and hopelessness was kind of pointless. And yet it worked some of the time. It worked. And he couldn't figure out why it even worked. So after a while he started to realise that what people really want is just a way of understanding the world around them. So if you can change your way of understanding the world, you change your condition. For example, if you have a debilitating illness or a sickness, you lose your eyesight, you lose your legs, or in this author's case, he was covered in these very serious burns. The way that you can approach your illness or your condition, you can change. So you can start to use your condition in a positive way or a negative way. You can use it as a way to grow or as a way to complain and get defeated. In the case of these people in George Kelly's practice, what he found was really they just needed some way to understand the world around them. So he would work on their constructs, he would work on their lists of beliefs, and try to change their beliefs a little bit, and that changed how they would view the world. Now you have constructs about yourself, about who you are and how you are. You probably say to yourself, I'm a kind person. You know, I fed my kids this morning. Kindness. I refrained from beating my kids this morning when they tore the house apart. I'm a kind person. And yet you know that you can develop more kindness. So you treat yourself through a set of constructs of how you believe yourself to be. This breaks down when you start watching yourself with mindfulness. For example, with children, you love your children. And that's a good construct, and it might be very real. However, if you hold that as a belief, you then believe that, well, whatever I'm doing with my children, I'm doing out of this love for them. And what may in actual fact be true is very often you're treating your children with unkindness, with impatience, even hatred, maybe a little bit strong, but certainly like with anger sometimes. And you see, if you're being mindful, you start to see these qualities come up, and it breaks down your self-constructs, your constructs of yourself. So then you can no longer call yourself, I'm a loving person, I'm a kindly person, I'm an impatient person, I'm an egotistical person, because you're not like that all the time. And as George Kelly observed, that actually what you are is an accumulation of roles. So a person can be very evil to their family. You know, a man could be a drunk or beat children or something like that, be very unkind, but be a very good boss. Somebody might be a very good employee, but might be a murderer in another role. And we all take on these roles with, you know, husbands and wives, with friends, with colleagues. We all have a whole bunch of different roles. So mindfulness is supposed to start to expose to yourself, break down your constructs of who you are and what you think you are, and show you the motivations and the way that you are moment to moment. So then you can start to accept, well, sometimes I'm like a mad dog. Sometimes I'm very kind. Sometimes I'm very patient. Sometimes I'm like horribly impatient. Sometimes I always tell this story of the loving kindness that we develop as monks. We deliberately set out in meditation to try to generate a feeling of loving kindness. And I always found this the most difficult practice. I don't know what that says about my constructed self. And for years and years, whenever we do meditation, you always spend the last 5-10 minutes trying to develop this sense of loving kindness. And there are various tricks. You can use any trick, it doesn't really matter. It's not a technique per se. You can visualize, if you visualize, you can visualize the world's pink. I knew somebody used to do this. I knew somebody who visualized giving people flowers. That was their way of, you know, trying to generate forgiveness and loving kindness. The way we do it in temples is, you know, may I be free from suffering, may I be happy. May this person be free from suffering, may they be happy. And I would just recite it, you know, may I be happy, may they be happy, may my parents be happy, may my friends be happy, like blah, 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 like when we get into the end of this meditation. I found it really difficult. And then years later, I could meditate to concentration to quite a good degree. I could stop my mind still. I can make the mind very bright, and it feels very happy. And then it suddenly occurred to me, why don't I offer this happiness to other people? And then suddenly I could do loving kindness meditation. So part of it is the willingness. You know, if you have the willingness to develop the qualities, then after a while it will start to come. Now we were talking a little earlier about the possibility of doing Jack and the Beanstalk as a production here. And so I thought this might be a good time to tell you a fairy tale. And I do a lot of fairy tales, but I always do fairy tales with adults. This is not for children. And if you mix the fairy tale with the explanation, and then these become very powerful kind of storylines, very powerful ways in which you can hold a concept in your mind. A difficult concept is made concrete in the fairy tale. So I thought we might do the Queen Bee fairy tale, because it relates, in my opinion, or in my explanation, it relates directly to this idea of self-observation, or this idea of mindfulness. So, if you're all ready, we'll start there. The Queen Bee. There were two big, strong, handsome brothers, and a third brother who was an insignificant dwarf. And the father, one day when the two big, handsome brothers were growing up, he decided to send them out into the world to make their fortune. So he gave each of them a part of the family fortune, and he sent them out into the world. And by, each of these brothers was very happy to be out into the world, but they squandered the money, and they spent it on trivial things, and before long they'd lost the money. And so they fell into an unhappy state. The insignificant dwarf, he wasn't given any money. He wasn't big and strong enough like the older brothers. But later on he thought, well, I'll go out and I'll find my older brothers to go and live with them. This will be my experience of the world. So he goes out and he finds his two brothers, both very poor and both in a very unhappy state. Never mind, he says. So the three of them, they get together, and the older brothers say to the younger one, okay, well, we'll look after you and we'll see how things go. So by and by they went walking along, and they came across, by chance, they went into the forest, and by chance they came across an ant's nest, ant hill. So the older brothers said, yeah, great, let's kick the ant hill over and we'll watch all these little ants go running around in panic, running around like crazy. And the other brother said, yeah, mother, this is a fun idea. And the insignificant dwarf, he said, I won't suffer you to kick over the ant's nest. Leave the ants to be by themselves.